Thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Glad
I
to be
really
back.
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So first, just tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the food space and specifically ended up in the frozen food space.
Yeah, so I've been in the food industry in various roles for almost 20 years, not quite 20 years. My first job was at Nestle. I worked there for a few years. I worked in a consulting firm. Then after I got my MBA, I started a food startup that launched a line of yogurt products. So I say that having started at Nestle and then run a startup, I've worked at the largest food company in the world and the smallest food company in the world.
Good range.
And then after that business ran its course, I've been for about the last year and a half with the American Frozen Food Institute, which is the National Trade Association of Frozen Food Manufacturers. It's my first time specifically focused on the category, but throughout my whole career I've been engaged with trade groups and industry organizations, and so it's like a fun way to stay in the industry and be involved and just wear a different hat.
Absolutely. So I mean, there are many subcategories within frozen, right? Which ones do you think are seeing the most innovation and why?
You know, interestingly, it's funny, I did this lounge with Carol 6 months ago, and we talked about a lot of things that I thought were happening, and I'm so gratified that some of them are coming to pass. And interestingly, even back then, and we're seeing this borne out now, is that some of the most interesting things, frankly, are happening in like frozen fruits and vegetables, which I think on its face might seem like a sleepier part of the frozen food business. But I think brands are looking, and a lot of times those products haven't always even been branded. It's a lot of store brand, private label style products. But Green Giant, Bird's Eye, other big companies are really looking at how to juice that business a little bit. So you're seeing, mashed, riced, spiralized, roasted, mixed, all these different forms to try and sort of induce some consumer interest and looking at how to integrate those items into their eating. And maybe just have the bag of peas look like something more than like an ice pack for when your kid takes something in the face.
So true. I mean, also there was this long time thing that frozen was kind of written off as not being fresh, and it was thought of as being that kind of junkier, I'm thinking in my mind like kid cuisine or something,
right.
Where it's like a last minute thing that you threw in your freezer that maybe you picked up, took out 6 months later.
Right.
How are these brands shaking off that reputation that they've had and trying to get people back into a space that they have long understood for being the stuff in the back of their freezer? Yeah,
I always say that I think we're often working against kind of what I call a 1980s concept of what frozen food is. And for years, for the last few years, the shopper has been told to shop the perimeter of the store, and so you see other center store categories, outside of frozen, having difficulties and that kind of feeling headwinds in that environment. I think the big brands have really sort of gotten serious about reformulating items, updating them, and kind of modernizing their product ranges, and realizing, one of our CEOs often says that a millennial doesn't know what Salisbury steak is. And once you internalize that idea and really understand who you're trying to design products for, we're getting that benefit. The other thing I would say is that I think there's a lot of research now that shows that the concept of fresh, which I think initially felt like a very literal definition of like a perishable item that resides in on the perimeter of the store, is now sort of morphing into kind of a qualitative idea about a way that I want to eat. And that if we can deliver sort of authentic, clean, good tasting products via the frozen aisle, that people will find their way down there and are open to that type of experience.
I think that's a really good point. The name of fresh really has evolved, and I think that we're seeing that even in terms of, we'll be speaking to Perfect Bar on stage tomorrow, and bars in that fresh category. Okay, so this is a topic that we've been discussing in the office.
Okay.
I need your expert opinion.
Okay.
We have seen articles from Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal and a lot of major outlets all taking very polarizing viewpoints on whether frozen is the hot category with millennials right now. In the same week, it was 2 articles saying that it is the place to be, and then 2 saying frozen is dead, get out of frozen. What's the deal? What are your members reporting?
Yeah, so I have sort of 2 views of that. One is there was an NPR story like the 3rd week of April that I knew that they'd been working on for a few months because they interviewed our CEO, and it was a pretty negative tone. And then literally like in the middle of May, a different NPR reporter had this much more positive story. So I feel like we're seeing evidence that there's this kind of wave of dawning realization that positive things are happening, and it's just a matter of when does the news arrive. So I do think things are looking up. I think, when we look at sales data, the last 52 weeks have been good, but the last 24 weeks are better than the last 52, and the last 12 are better than the last 24. So it's literally increasingly getting better over time. The other thing is I think there are some lifestyle things happening, partially with millennials, but also just across society. And some of this is speculative. I don't know that we've explicitly proven this, but there's speculation that the continued increase in telecommuting and working from home is an opportunity for a frozen meal at lunch. That even, and this is again just something I've read the last week or two, even that like the rise of Netflix and the increasing options of home entertainment are keeping people at home on the weekends when maybe they were going out. So, these are things we'll still be, I think, testing out and investigating further. But I think in addition to looking at our products, we also just have to look at the lives of consumers and understand how the convenience proposition, which is always going to be sort of, I think, the leading value of a frozen item, fits into people's lives. And so I think there are other things happening, outside of our control, but which we need to understand so we see how we fit in there.
And I think even within the industry itself, there's a lot of conversations about just the state of frozen and different ideas on just where we are and what are the best strategies to moving forward with that category. And we even had Daily Harvest speak to that today. And I know that she had a point of view that some people may really agree with in the category and some may not. So can you kind of speak to just what your reactions were to that?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was sitting kind of in the second row, and I think I was like, Carol and I were sort of sending mental messages to one another as she was saying. So Rachel from Daily Harvest is someone I've known for a while and who I admire immensely, and for whom I'm a customer. We've been receiving Daily Harvest boxes at my house for about 8 months now. And I think, she launches this very sort of purposeful, sort of mission-oriented, high-end premium product in a category like frozen, which, for all the reasons we've just been talking about, is not necessarily characterized by that in the retail setting. And so in telling her story, she talks about this sort of kind of ossified view of the frozen category, which is something we're all working against. And so I both hugely admire Daily Harvest and her work, and then I cringe a little bit when I hear her talk about the category because she's working against a thing that we're trying to shift. But I totally get where she's coming from the standpoint of that's what she was seeing, and why, for instance, in the case of the question she was answering this morning, she chose a direct-to-consumer model as opposed to going through retail because she thought the frozen food aisle was not a territory she wanted to have to navigate. She wanted to go directly to her end user. So I think she's been hugely successful. I expect that to continue, and I hope that there will be a place in the frozen food aisle for items like that, where maybe a year or two ago that didn't seem like something that was plausible.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that we're seeing too within the frozen food space, I feel like, is a lot of brands entering it as a way to bring this idea of fresh in a more accessible price point to a lot of people. I think we've seen that for a while in produce in terms of, yes, I can't maybe afford fresh produce, but I'll get a few bags of frozen vegetables to try to feed it to my kids.
Right.
So are you thinking that, where do you think accessibility plays into as we start to see these natural premium brands start to enter the space and also ask for a more premium price point when they're doing their methods and their sourcing in sustainable ways? I think of even the seafood kits that are starting to pop up.
Yeah, I think that, I think that some of these smaller, they're not really small anymore. I'm thinking of Amy's and Saffron Road and Evol and some of these more premium frozen brands, I think have shown us through their success that there is a consumer who's ready to go down that aisle and pay an extra $1 for something that has maybe a higher flavor profile or cleaner label or higher quality ingredients or organic certification. I think that's a story that I would like to see larger brands sort of lean into and adopt, and I think slowly we are beginning to see that. And I think, just again, going back to that convenience idea, a way to, utilize the convenience proposition. One of the items I read recently that I really liked was kind of comparing what's happening in frozen now to sort of the state of the meal kit proposition.
Yep.
And the line that someone used was, isn't a frozen entree just a meal kit that costs less and requires less work? And so I think if we're just solving problems for consumers and meeting them where they are and understanding what their needs are, and kind of through that prism of convenience and sort of simplicity, kind of providing that to them, then that's where the opportunity is.
Awesome. Well, our time is up. Thank you so much for coming and chatting
That's great.
with me.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad that we were able to kind of sort through the office dilemma.
Yes, I hope so. Thanks so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you so much.
All right.